Hi guys, welcome back. This is our last segment for the show. I hope you've been enjoying and I hope right now you have a clear indication of what it means to compare growth. But now we're also going to take it further and actually look at some numbers, exactly what does it mean to compare growth. So stay with me and I will take you places. Let's just look at what we've done so far. So our big idea, which we always gonna go back to, was growth. We looked at patterns, graphs, equations. Our context has been on finance because we're trying to assist ourselves in trying to make better financial decisions or to make better financial choices when it comes to maybe saving and all of that. Now, with this inflation here, the concept now that we are talking about is inflation, which is actually the rate at which, so this will be the rate at which the price of goods and services increases every year. Now, guys, I think you know what this means. They've been saying rate of inflation or rate of living or standard of living is too high. You know when people are saying that just randomly and haphazardly in our society. What that means is just yesterday we used to buy bread with like 10 rands. Now bread is like 17 rands. And in the future, it might be 30 rands to buy some bread. So this is what inflation actually means. That yesterday it was this, today it's that, tomorrow it will be this. So you see, the differences there is what inflation is all about. Similarly with goods, with services as well. Yesterday, you find that for you to go to the doctor, it was a bit cheap, but today is a bit quite pricey. Tomorrow, it might be more pricey because then more people are getting sick and medicine is getting more expensive and doctors are getting more expensive. So you see, all of that has to do with inflation, goods and services going up in terms of the price. And that's the rate that we are looking at. Now, to go further on this, we say this can vary from year to year. When I'm saying from year to year, you know that the previous year, was the price for a certain thing that we used maybe to buy every day. And then the following year, it's different. And the following year, it will be different. And the following year, it will be different. So this normally varies from year to year. Now, we have what we call the South African Reserve Bank. That's where we get our money from, or those are the people that actually create the money for us. And the Treasury, they normally aim to keep the inflation rate between 3 and 6% per annum. So what does this mean? It means the rate at which goods and services are increasing is normally between 3 and 6%. And not really more than 6% or less than 3%, but depending on what is happening in our country at that time or what is happening in the society at that time, you know there's a lot of factors that will affect how the rate is increased. Maybe there's high demand or there is less demand or not a lot of people can afford, and then you see then they start playing around with the rate of inflation for the coming years. Because one thing for sure is everything gets a bit more expensive as the years progresses, but how expensive it gets, it normally depends on a number of factors that I'm sure you also know and you are seeing on the news when they are talking about those. Now also the midpoint of the targeted inflation rate is normally 4.5, right? So when you're sitting at 4.5, you're roughly a bit safe in terms of it increasing or it staying at whatsoever the price is at the time. Now let's just look at some graph that actually it tells us what is happening with the inflation in South Africa in specific. So this talks about the consumer price inflation, which was 2.2 in June 2020, and then which was up from 2.1 in May 2020. What does this mean? It means that at this point here, things will be 2.2% more expensive than it was in the previous month or in the previous year or in the previous decade and so. So you see, this is what actually shows you what exactly it means. But you can see that it fluctuates, it goes up, it goes down, it becomes a bit linear, it continues to go down, it goes up. So this is all about inflation. And all of this has been dependent on what is happening at that present moment. So was there maybe a virus that we're dealing with, or was there maybe unemployment that we're dealing with? Was there maybe a lot of people not being able to meet their ends meet in terms of the goods and services that they need, especially the most important goods and services? So those are the things that actually affect this annual consumer price inflation, as you can see, from like 2015 up until 2020. And like in June, it was roughly 2.2. And this would mean that it was 2.2% more expensive to buy maybe bread, or to buy petrol, or to buy something that you need the most at home. And then with also the concept of inflation, we know it's normally compounded over time. Now, let me explain what this means. Inflation has nothing to do with a constant increase. It will never be that way. We just saw now in the previous graph that it normally at times goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it remains a bit linear for some time, and then it continues depending on what the factors are. So what this means is it will never be a linear growth or a linear decrease for that matter. It's a fluctuation of going up, going down, going up, linear bit, up, down, and all of that. So inflation is compound interest and not simple interest. So please make sure that when you see a question and it talks about inflation, automatically you must be thinking about compound interest and not simple interest. And also, when the rate of inflation decreases, prices still increase, but at a slower rate. Now, remember what I said the definition was. Inflation is the rate at which, not necessarily that the rate of inflation maybe will be decreasing, therefore the prices are a bit cheaper in that time. No, that's not what it means. It just means that they are still increasing, but now they are increasing at a very slow pace, a slow rate over time, not necessarily as a rapid increase of maybe prices for our goods and services. Now, you must also consider inflation when making investment decisions. Guys, please remember that everything that we've spoken about does not constitute as financial advice. I don't know much about that. This is just me using numbers, which is mathematics, just for you to look at how can you make certain decisions. And mostly when you go to financial advisors, they will definitely try to tell you that you must take advantage of compound interest. But let's see, how do you exactly take advantage of maybe compound interest? Should it be for a short period of time? Should it be a long period of time? Or should it be a very long period of time? Let's just have a look at those two differences. Now, there's an item that costs 1,000 today, right? If the average rate of inflation is 4.5, how much will the item cost in, please think about this, 5 years or in 10 years? We are going to compare the two. If you look at a graph for this, you can see that the inflation rate is 4.5, right? After 5 years, this would actually cost 1,250. And it's supposed to double here, but when it's doubling here, it's just below 10 years. So it does not take the same amount of time for the increase to double, which is the 250. But when it gets to 10 years, it's slightly more than the initial increase, which was the 250. So it's a bit more than twice the rate of inflation that we are talking about here. Now, the question that we're going to then try to ponder on is, instead of buying this item now, which maybe I might not afford it, what will happen if Joseph invests that amount in a fixed deposit account that earns him interest of 4.5, the same inflation rate that we are talking about, but now at simple interest? Will he have saved enough to buy the item in, let's say, 5 years, or in 10 years. We're just going to look at whether Joseph will have, remember how much Joseph must have. It must be slightly above 1.5, right? So maybe we can say 1.6 something or 1.5 and 60 rands in 10 years time. And then in 5 years time, it will cost 250 more. So we're just gonna see whether Joseph will actually have enough after 5 years at simple interest, after 10 years at simple interest. So we can see that after 5 years at simple interest, Joseph will have slightly less of that amount. So it will be slightly less than what that item will actually be costing at the time. But if you look at 10 years, it will be way more than less in terms of the inflation rate at that time. So you can see now it's even below the 1.5 mark, and the inflation would be above the 1.5 mark. So you can see it's a bit quite low. But now let's see if it was now not simple growth and it's compound growth. What would that mean? Now, instead of buying this, then Sarah says, nah, I want to invest this at an interest that is 6.5%, right? Which is 2% more than the inflation rate. But now at compound interest and not on simple interest. We need to look at whether she will have saved enough to buy the item in 5 years or in 10 years. In 5 years' time, if we look at this, this is where Sarah will be, right? Sarah will be at 1,379 cents. So this is quite more than the 1,250, which that item would be costing at the time. But if you look at a 10-year period, she will actually be at a higher amount of money. So she will actually have some excess amount there after buying that item if it's on a compound growth. But now what we need to look at is Sarah actually went for 2% more than what the inflation rate is. So this will actually be showing us that compound interest is the way to go. But it depends on what your financial decisions will be and what your financial needs are at the time. And please remember, all that I'm saying, I'm just using maths and numbers to show you how you can look at different comparisons when it comes to the growth. Not necessarily financial advice or anything like that. So please remember that. And then we will look at, if it's compound interest, you can see that the longer you leave your amount of money that you saved, the more money you get. The shorter, yes, you will still get more money, but not really that much more. Whereas if it's a longer period, it will even double up. Remember when you spoke about compound interest, we said the longer the period, the shorter the doubling up of the interest, but the longer the shorter the period towards the end there, you will see that it actually doubles up quite very quick. So compound interest is the way to go. But let's just summarize this quickly. Remember that when we study growth, we're looking at what it means to have change, right? We are measuring change, the rate of change. We are measuring whether the change is constant or not constant. Remember, it is only constant when we are dealing with a simple growth, together with the rate of change is also constant when we're dealing with our simple growth. And then simple growth is normally linear, meaning it's a straight line like that. But with compound growth, remember that it does not really have a constant change or even a constant rate of change. And what this means is with a compound interest or with compound growth, it follows a geometric pattern. And then this then goes to it being an exponential, and it then takes time to show an increase. Guys, time is very important when you are saving under compound growth. So the quicker you start your investment, the better returns you are going to get from that. And then so far we've looked at simple, compound, and some random growth. We looked at also random growth being something that is a combination of simple and compound growth, because at times it's a bit linear, at times it's fluctuating, at times it's going down, at times there's a lot of inflation that is taking place, at times the currency is strong, the currency is weak. So it's just a fluctuation and a very random thing that is happening. The trend may not always show an increase, but could follow a cycle. So every 5 years, you can see that it's increasing or decreasing. And you know, there are people who are actually trying to predict this. Hence, we always see this on the news and on every social media that we're looking at. And then lastly, everything that we've looked at is the big concept of growth. We linked this to what we call patterns, because every growth follows a certain pattern. And then we used graphs to try and analyze what exactly does it mean to have growth. We used equations, and then our context was on society. Remember, a virus, unemployment rate at that time, exercising, health, and all of those things. Socio-economic backgrounds and all, that's what we're talking about. And then lastly, we looked at the concept of finance. So all of this, guys, is just you punching the numbers, playing with the numbers, comparing what works for you, what are your needs, and always just doing some maths. Remember, guys, mathematics is food for the soul. Till next time.